Alright, what's going on everyone? Today I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Bloomburrow starter kit decks. Some very important notes here, and this is very important guys. I will not be upgrading these with the intention of keeping them balanced against each other. My goal is to make them as individually powerful as possible, so if you intend to play them against each other, I recommend leaving them as is. I will also stick to the deck's retail price for my budget, which is currently around $20 USD, so we're looking at $10 per deck roughly. And lastly, we will be upgrading for paper, which means we get to fill the decks with bulk rares. If you want an arena upgrade guide, let me know, but that requires completely different builds. Would have to be limiting ourselves to commons and uncommons. So let's start with the more competitive deck, and that is the hair raising deck. This is a tribal rabbit deck with a lot of powerful tribal synergies. However, the deck is filled with a lot of suboptimal cards and some pretty cool rares that, while powerful, don't really synergize with the rest of the deck. So let's fix that. We'll start by taking out 3 Worn Elders for 3 Valley Quest Callers. Both of these do the same job of pumping up our board, but the Quest Caller does it much more efficiently by not requiring mana. In addition to being a stronger body, it's a 2 mana 2/3, and it gives us the ability to scry whenever we play a rabbit, so we can filter away extra lands or help find them if we need to. Next, we'll take out 1 Rabbit Response for a 4th Valley Quest Caller. Both of these pump. We're just trading the ability to sort of surprise our opponent with instant speed, 4 mana pumping for a 2 mana 2/3 that lets us scry. It's just more optimal. Quest Caller is one of the best rabbits in the deck. Next, we'll be taking out 2 Giant Growths for 2 Paw Patch Patrol. Both of these can pump individual creatures. The spell just gives +3/+3, but the patrol will give +1/+1 counters every time our opponent tries to target our stuff. Not to mention it's a 1 mana 2/1 and it has Offspring to double this effect, so it's just much more aggressive and very powerful. Next, we'll take out 3 Druid of the Spade for 3 Seasoned Warren Guard. These are very similar. The Druid is a 3 mana 4/3 with Trample if we have a token, which is fine. 3 mana 4/3 is above curve, it's alright. The Warren Guard, on the other hand, is a 1 mana 3/2, which is very powerful for a 1-drop. And then if we don't have a token, the Druid is a 3 mana 2/3, which is just actively bad, and the Warren is a 1 mana 1/2, which technically isn't as good as like a Novice Inspector, I guess, but it's still above curve. So the Warren Guard is basically always good, and the Druid of the Spade is sometimes sort of okay. Next, we'll take out 2 Clifftop Lookouts for 2 Hop Tuits. The Lookouts find a land, but they aren't even rabbits, and they're just kind of mid in this deck. Hop Tuit makes 3 1/1s, which is really powerful considering we can pump our board with the Quest Callers. A single Quest Caller makes this 3 mana for 6 power, and we're going to have more payoffs for going wide coming up. For example, we're going to take out 2 Rabbit Bites for 2 Case of the Gateway Express. So both of these are removal. The Bites reward us for having a big creature, and the Case rewards us for having a lot of creatures. And this is a rabbit stack, so we're usually going wide. The Case, by the way, is going to deal 1 damage per creature you have, basically. So if you have 4 creatures, it deals 4 damage. However, the Case has the upside of, if you can solve the Case, it's going to give all your creatures +1/+0. And all we have to do to achieve that is attack with 3 creatures, which is very easy in our go wide aggro deck. So it's a sort of parallel, similar removal spell, but with upside. Next, we're going to take out Colossification for Burrow Guard Mentor. The enchantment makes a creature massive, but it costs 1,000,000 mana. It's just too expensive. On the flip side, the Mentor is usually just absolutely huge, and it only costs 2 mana. So I know 20 is a big number. Colossification it's fun, but it's just hard to cast. And the Mentor is just very powerful in this deck. So similarly, we're going to take out Fecund Greenshell for a 4th Burrow Guard Mentor. I actually really like the Greenshell. I would recommend putting it in a different deck. It's a great starting point for like a green ramp deck. But in Tribal Rabbits, it doesn't really have a place. And the Burrow Guard Mentors will absolutely win tons of games. Next, I want to take out Sarah Redeemer for Phineas Ace Archer. The Redeemer is cool, but Phineas is deadly. He gives counters to all of your creatures when he attacks, and he draws cards if you have a lot of power, which is very easy to do. He just puts so much power out, in addition to drawing us extra cards. Redeemer, like Green Shell, is kind of cool. You could probably put it in another deck, but in Tribal Rabbits, I want Phineas. We're also going to take out a Pileated Provisioner, or a Pileated, how's this pronounced? I don't know. But we're going to take it out for a third Phineas. So the flying is nice, but a 5 mana 3/4 flyer it's pretty bad. Phineas, on the other hand, just puts out so many counters. You know, he's probably going to die in combat, but he's going to replace himself with another card. It's just very good. And I actually don't like the bird at all, so I want to take out another one for a third Paw Patch Patrol. It's just a very aggressive rabbit. It can put a bunch of counters out if our opponent's playing control, which, you know, we don't like control when we're a creature-based aggro deck. So it's a nice like safety net for the deck that really punishes us. And yeah, it helps us go wide too. So it makes our lords better. They soak up more counters, all that. It's just really good. And I want to take out the third Provisioner for a third case of the Gateway Express. A removal spell that pumps our board just seems better than a clunky 5 mana 3/4 that makes a single counter. I'd rather just have the extra removal. And finally, this deck has way too many lands. Both of these decks are playing 27. 27 lands, by the way, is a Magic Arena thing, because there's some conspiracy theories and thoughts that if you play 27 lands, the hand smoothing algorithm will give you 3 land hands more often. 27 is fine in like a ramp deck or a control deck, but in an aggro creature-based deck, no way do I want 27 lands. So let's take out 1 forest and 1 plains for 2 Dewdrop Cures. So this is going to return 2 creatures that cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And if you want to gift a card, which will let your opponent draw, you can return a third. Not necessary, you don't have to do that. It's either 3 mana, return 2, or let them draw to get a third. The majority of our deck costs 2 or less, and this is a great way to generate a surge of power when resources are low in the late game. The biggest danger of any creature-based aggro deck is just running out of cards. You eventually run out of steam, so using 1 card to get 2 creatures back is very nice in the late game. And that's it for our budget build of Selesnya Rabbits, just over $10. The Otter deck is just under, so we're about on pace here. But there are some non-budget cards we can include. Also note that you can improve the mana base, of course, with better dual lands. And because this is a competitive deck, you can find lots of deck lists on meta tracking websites, so I'll be sure to leave links to those in the description below. Moving on to Otter Limits. This is an Izzet Otter's deck that cares about controlling otters while casting spells. It has the same problems as the Hair Raising deck. There's some weak filler cards and some really cool rares that just don't really synergize with the deck. I mean, Mockingbird's great, but we don't need it here. Also, just a fun little note, this deck has 1 copy of Bria. I really wanted to add more of these to the deck, but it's currently a $17 card. In fact, this and Mockingbird together make up, currently at the time of this recording, make up more than the value of the whole starter kit, which is kind of funny. Anyway, let's start by taking out 2 Bellowing Criers for 2 Thundertrap Trainers. Both of these are 2 drops that are trying to get us more cards. The key difference is the trainer is an otter, which we care about in a tribal otter deck, and also you can offspring the trainer in the late game to get an extra card. So the Bellowing Crier is fine. It's a really good draft card, but Thundertrap Trainer, it's better. Next, we'll take out 3 Thieving Otters for 3 Frolicking Familiar. There's a world that exists where Thieving Otter could be okay. You would want it in a very controlling deck where you can very consistently keep the board clear so it can hit the opponent and draw cards. The problem is we're not that deck, and I can never hit the opponent and draw. So, it's cool, but you never get to draw with it. So instead, Frolicking Familiar, what's cool about this is the Adventure. It's only 1 mana for 1 damage, but it's a spell that's going to trigger all of our Otter spell matters stuff. And then it's a flyer that's going to get pumped by all of our spells. So it's both an enabler for prowess and whatnot, as well as a payoff. Next, we'll take out 2 Waterspout Wardens for 2 Valley Floodcallers. I don't really understand why the Warden is in the deck. It's a 3 mana 3/2 frog that can kind of get flying. I mean, okay. But the Flood Caller is going to pump our board every time we cast an instant or sorcery. It's basically like a budget Bria. Bria gives all of our stuff prowess. Flood Caller kinda does, sort of. Not exactly, close though. It also has flash, and it's going to let us cast sorceries and enchantments as though they had flash. The important thing here though is whenever we cast a spell, our entire board gets +1/+1. It can create huge surges of power. Next, we're going to take out the third Waterspout Warden for a third Stormcatch Mentor. So this reduces the cost of our spells, which is huge because it allows us to draw through our deck with cards like Pearl of Wisdom. With just the Stormcatch Mentor in play, a Pearl of Wisdom is 1 mana, draw 2, which is amazing. So yeah, this is just a good card in this archetype. Definitely want a third copy. And I don't know why the Frog is in the deck. Next, I want to take out 3 Alania's Pathmaker for 3 Otterball Antiques. So the Pathmaker is just too clunky. It's 4 mana, 4/2, gets us an extra card, which is nice. But the Antiques, on the other hand, they make a 1/1 with prowess, so it helps us develop our board, but also it's a spell itself. So it triggers prowess as well as giving us a creature with prowess, and it has flashback, so we kind of make up for the card advantage we're losing with the Pathmaker by being able to cast this twice and get 2 creatures with it. And it's very good in this deck. These 1/1s with prowess really add up. They get a lot of power. And as such, we'll take out the last Bellowing Crier for our 4th Otterball Antique. Same logic here. The Bellowing Crier is fine. It's not an otter. And remember with the spell, it triggers prowess as well as making a prowess creature. And we do get to play it twice with flashback, which is very good. Next, we can take out Mockingbird for Stormcatcher's Talent. The bird is super cool. It's just not ideal for this deck. We don't really take advantage of it at all. The talent, on the other hand, is going to give us more otters with prowess. And in the late game, we can start leveling it up for value. First, it returns spells from our graveyard to our hand, and eventually it'll start pumping out otters every time we cast an instant or sorcery, which can really get out of hand. Next, we'll take out Charmed Sleep for Rabid Gnaw. I would say this is kind of optional. I just like this a little bit better as a removal spell. It can be hard to target big creatures, but being able to remove something and still pump our creatures, because not all of our creatures have prowess. Some of them get pumped by instants and sorceries. So Charmed Sleep is fine with prowess. Both of these are going to trigger prowess, but they aren't both going to trigger our stuff that say instant or sorcery. They're comparable. I would say it's optional, but I definitely prefer Rabid Gnaw. And I also think it's worth taking out the other Charmed Sleep for a Sleight of Hand. While technically not a removal spell, it helps us dig for more stuff. So not only can it potentially find removal, but it can also smooth out land problems, right? It can find more creatures, it can find more lands, whatever we need. It's also just a 1 mana spell, which we care about. And for that reason, we're going to take out a Sword of Vengeance for another Sleight of Hand. We don't really need this equipment. I mean, it's cool. Like, it's pretty clunky. I think it's a little expensive for what it does. But man, filtering. 1 mana filtering with Sleight of Hand is so important. So many of our creatures care about playing spells, and being able to play a spell and just find another spell is huge. So because of that, we're going to take out 2 Quick Tusk Boars for 2 Sleight of Hands. This brings us up to 4. You know, the boar is big, it's powerful, but it doesn't synergize with the deck at all. This is just a big beater for like new players, right? New players who might struggle to find a way to win the game. It's just a big creature that can just kind of brute force a win, which is fine, but I just prefer Sleight of Hand. Finding more otters, finding more spells, filtering away lands, or finding lands, whatever. Just the consistency of Sleight of Hand is pretty huge. Also, if you wanted to, Bria here would be nice, but they're $17. I also think it's worth taking out Flame Lash for Stoke the Flames. This might not seem like much, right? They're both 4 mana, they deal 4 damage, but the Stoke the Flames has Convoke, which can be very useful, especially if we have the Flood Caller out. So this card, when we cast a spell, it's going to pump our board, but it also untaps them. Did I forget to mention that? It untaps them. So what we can do is we can tap all of our stuff, cast Stoke the Flames for 0 mana, and then when it resolves, it's gonna untap our stuff. It's really good. They work really well together. But anyway, I don't think this is 100% necessary, but I do think it's better. And finally, just like the other deck, too many lands. We're gonna take out 2 mountains and an island for 3 Slick Sequence. As I said, 27 is just too many, and we can be a little bit lighter on this deck because our curve is pretty low and we have a lot of ways to draw cards, so we'll find lands like with the Sleight of Hands, for example. So Slick Sequence is kind of cool, It's a 2 mana, deals 2 damage, and if it's the second spell we've played, it's going to draw a card. So this allows us to chain spells, right? We could play a sleight of hand, find a card, play Slick Sequence, deal 2 damage to something, draw a card, and that allows us to keep casting spells to make our Otters really big. And that's going to be it. Unfortunately, Otters aren't a competitive deck. Even with 0 budget, it's not competitive. But there are still some expensive cards we could add. I keep talking about Bria. Very good. She gives all of our stuff prowess. She makes all of our stuff huge, and she makes all of our stuff unblockable. Well, one thing at a time, but no, she can make our stuff hard to block. But there's other cards too, other Otter spell payoffs that are pretty cool, that are just a bit too expensive. But just keep in mind, spending money on this deck, it's not a tier 1 deck. It's never going to be a tier 1 deck, or at least it's not right now. Also, of course, lands. If you have them, play them. But that's going to be it for upgrades. There's plenty of room for improvement, as we only spent around $10 per deck. We're under our $20 budget. We technically spent a little bit more. I mean, we're talking less than $1 more on the Rabbits deck. But regardless, $10 per deck definitely makes them much more powerful than where we started. So hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next one.